Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Power Is Now TV. My name is Eric Frazier. It's a beautiful day in Southern California, a great day to talk about real estate. And today we're talking about the 1968 Fair Housing Act. This is our second year, folks, of talking about the importance of the Fair Housing Act, what we can do to support it, to make it more enforceable, the challenges that exist. And one thing that really stands out, it's 54 years. 54 years have gone by, and we're not sure if the Fair Housing Act has lived up to its goals and aspirations of those who authored the bill. And April 11th, 1968, President Johnson passed the bill. Did you know at the time, 100 cities were on fire, riots took place, Dr. King died. It was a lot that happened, and all of that was perhaps the catalyst to President Johnson signing the bill into law. So we're asking now, is the Fair Housing Act doing what it's supposed to do? With me today is Matt Callahan. He's the president of Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership and Loan Originator with Best Capital Funding to discuss the 1968 Fair Housing Act. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Matt, the pleasure is all mine, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. You are involved on the front end of the business of homeownership, helping people to achieve the American dream of homeownership, and yet you're also on the nonprofit side, educating and providing information and resources to ensure that buyers are ready, and that, you know, all the players involved are truly engaged to do the right thing for consumers. Now, I want to learn all about LA Partners and homeownership and your role there. But before we do, we have a tradition on the show where we ask all of our guests, what does the phrase, "the power is now," mean to you in the context of who you are, what you do, and fair housing?
Thanks, Eric. The power is now for me means not waiting for someone else to do something or waiting for our leaders to do something. It's personally taking responsibility for making change now at the most retail level possible. And so that's for me what it means. And I think in the context of fair housing, it's always constantly monitoring my own business practices, being as inclusive as I can with the clients that I work with, creating as much opportunity as I can for the clients I work with. So that's the best answer I can give to that.
That's a great answer, Matthew. And I love the part of taking personal responsibility. So often people want to point the finger at others, right? Blame others for their circumstances, blame others for their inaction, blame others for their lack of information and knowledge, when the power is within us, right? We have to take personal responsibility to get the information we need, to do the things we need to do so that we can achieve the American dream or any aspect of being prepared to participate in home ownership. And I think also, as one originator to another, we also do, I think, carry a great responsibility to be fair, to be inclusive, to not discourage, but to encourage people in moving forward in the process, because many, not only are they, looking for help on the outside, but they also internally have fear, right? Fear of even starting the process. Have you found that to be the case?
Absolutely. And, we talk about what the barriers to home ownership are, and there's the traditional ones of, lack of down payment or credit reputation or affordability, obviously, is a big one. But frankly, the biggest challenge that I see is what I call the access barrier. And that is the lack of information people have about the home buying process. And, I know in my own life, when I don't understand something, I don't move forward with it. And so getting information on explaining how things work, taking the time to explain things. And I know when I meet with my clients who are interested in purchasing home, I think the big value added that I bring is just spending time with them and really going over the buying process and it doesn't matter if someone, in the rest of their life is very sophisticated and or someone who, is not very sophisticated, but everybody has substantial questions about the buying process. And unless you address that, people can't move forward. They won't move forward. And so I definitely like to spend time with that. I had an experience yesterday, Eric, with one of my clients that I could share with you just briefly. Yesterday, I had an experience with a young couple who are interested in purchasing their first home. He's an MTA driver. She does in-home care. Their annual income is about $70,000 a year. They have 2 kids. They're interested in purchasing a home in Los Angeles. They qualify for down payment assistance. And, we've been going through the pre-approval process, and we finally got to the point where we were going to obtain the mortgage credit report. We got the credit report, and unfortunately, he has substantial issues on his credit that need to be addressed. And so, one of the things that I did good, I think, for myself, just from a business standpoint, is I stopped everything and really, instead of just saying, well, you don't qualify, go work on your credit, we spent substantial time going over the credit report and working out a very specific action plan on what he needed to do. And then the thing that kind of touched my heart was his wife called me back and said, Matt, does that mean we're out of the program now, that we can't buy a house now, that we, what does that mean? And I reassured that it didn't mean that. We went over the process again, and I even sent her an invitation for a calendar appointment next month till we can check in and see how they're doing. And so, I felt great about that, because instead of it being a loss, it was a win in a way. They still have a lot of work to do, and I think we have to hope and pray that they're able to do the things they need to do. But it's not them leaving discouraged. It's not them leaving and saying there's no solution. And so for me, in that instance, the notion of education and spending time to really educate people and not just approve or disapprove somebody was really important.
Matthew, I love that story. And I'm so glad to hear that, because, a lot of loan officers out there kind of want to turn and burn kind of thing, right? Get the application, look at the credit report. Sorry, your credit score is too low. Thank you very much. Next, and there's no real empathy, no encouragement, no education, and they are well positioned to do just that. But the goal is volume, right? Get as many applications in as you possibly can, get them in, get them out. And it's rare to find loan officers like yourself who will actually take the time and to talk with a client with, derogatory credit, and they need to put some things in place and do some things. And so I really appreciate you sharing that story. That's how I roll also, Matt. I spend a great deal of time with my clients. I have a pool, actually, of buyers who every month someone pops through ready to buy because they're in this process of getting their credit together or paying off debt or doing something. And I think that every loan originator should have that kind of pool. You have your pool of buyers that are ready to go right now, and you have your pool of buyers that you're working with. And every month someone pops through. And let me tell you, from my perspective, the referral business, it's much greater from my pool of buyers who don't qualify than my pool of buyers who do qualify now. Have you found that to be your experience?
True, absolutely. And I love the expression, I'm sure you've heard of it, that the fortunes are in the follow-up. As mortgage and real estate professionals, we just can't focus on what's immediately in front of us, but building a pipeline of clients that are ready today, ready 6 months from now, ready next year, ready 2 years, and staying in touch with them. The fortunes are in the follow-up for sure.
Absolutely. Now, Matt, in addition to being a loan originator with Best Capital, you're the president of Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership. Tell us about your role there and what the organization is all about.
Great. So back in 1997, in the Clinton administration, there was an effort launched with HUD Secretary Henry Cisneros called National Partners in Homeownership. And it was a collaborative effort across the country of national organizations, regional organizations, local organizations to come together collaboratively to work to expand homeownership opportunities. And it wasn't a new grant program. It wasn't new funding. It was a strategy to collaborate and work together and leverage each other's strengths. And so what happened was there was a network of local partnerships. And I was involved back then in '97 with the creation of Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership. And we did a number of different things: homebuyer fairs, homebuyer education workshops, promoting our successes with different people purchasing homes. And but then it died out. It died out around 2003, and that effort kind of wound down. And then so I got together with some of the veterans of that time in 2012, and we resurrected it at Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership. And it's an all-volunteer organization. We don't have any staff. We all just pitch in and make it happen. And we do two key things. 10 times a year, we offer a homebuyer education event. I like to call it an event instead of a workshop. And the purpose of these events are to allow people to qualify for their homebuyer education certificate from a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. We're not ourselves a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, but we partner with one who is. And so we co-host these educational workshops, but we include a motivational component. And the thing I think it really distinguishes our workshops from other homebuyer education opportunities is that we really focus on getting access to all of the assistance programs that are offered by federal, state, and local government agencies and nonprofit organizations. So we're sort of really very inclusive. We talk about all the programs that are out there. And one of the specific components we have in the educational workshop is how these programs can work, how to access them, how they boost buying power, how they address affordability. And so people literally leave the workshop not only with their certificate that's required for most first-time buyer programs, but they have the motivation, the practical knowledge, and specifically they know which programs are going to be available to help them overcome the various barriers to buying a home.
That's really fantastic. Knowledge is power, and the power is now, especially as interest rates are rising rapidly and home prices don't seem to be affected at all. They're continuing to rise. Normally, in a market where interest rates start to rise, we see property values start to decrease, and that's not happening here. And we know why: the extreme shortage of supply. Can you share some success stories of your workshops, and what is the passion here behind doing this work? Because it is work and it's volunteer work.
Yeah. The passion, let me start with the passion. The passion is when I look at all the different ways that as individuals, as society, we can look to make our world better in some way, that we can overcome the wealth gaps that we see in our country. We can overcome challenges that we see in neighborhood conditions that are, unfair. How we can deal with gentrification, for example. How we can help people grow economically. The simplest, most direct solution is expanding homeownership opportunities. There's a lot of great strategies you can implement, but expanding homeownership opportunities is the most direct path to doing that. And so that's been my passion. It's been born out of my personal life, in my family, but clearly in my work. I was thinking about an example of a young man I helped purchase a house using a special program that the city of Los Angeles offered. And he purchased a house about 8 years ago in Watts, as we all know, is one of the toughest neighborhoods, in the country. And he was able to he owned a small trucking company, made about $45,000 a year, had several kids. And I met with him about a month ago to talk about maybe refinancing that loan. And we were looking at the profile of his property. And over that period of time, he's built up over $200,000 of equity. There's no other way that this guy could have achieved that level of financial wealth and stability short of other than home ownership. So if we're looking for solutions, homeownership's the answer.
For those of you just joining us, we're talking to Matt Callahan. He's the president of Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership and Loan Originator with Best Capital. We're talking about the 1968 Fair Housing Act and how important it is really to homeownership, the issues, the challenges that we are facing right now with housing and housing discrimination. So we're going to get into those details in just a few minutes. For those of you who are listening to our podcast, please share this information. You can find The Power Is Now on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And take a moment now and download our TV app, Power Is Now TV, where you can watch all of our incredible content about housing and homeownership and information about down payment assistance right here on The Power Is Now. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Matt Callahan is going to talk more about the 1968 Fair Housing Act.
The Power Is Now media is worldwide with growing audience of future homebuyers, investors, builders, developers, real estate agents, and brokers. The Power Is Now media is well positioned to increase awareness and produce results for our growing roster of advertising partners. An advertisement on any of our platforms is the right step toward reaching and communicating key brand messages to a targeted network of individuals, families, and communities interested in housing. Our content areas include feature stories and profiles on successful real estate agents, business owners, government, and community leaders. The Power Is Now magazines are the leading resource for real estate agents, mortgage bankers, entrepreneurs, and small home ownership businesses, providing leaders with business strategy information, resources, and tools through PIN, real estate, and programming guide magazines. Stay up to the minute with real estate and mortgage news and information from industry experts. VIP agents are able to feature listings each week. The Power Is Now TV radio podcast features weekly shows that include Homebuyers Town Hall, Real Estate Roundtable, VIP Agent Spotlight, and so much more. Each week, VIP agents have opportunities to be featured guests on the shows. VIP agents can discuss and showcase houses, neighborhoods, and provide brief introduction. The interviews are unlimited 10 to 15 minutes on each current listing. This product alone separates you from your competition. The Power Is Now delivers to you market update interview to promote listing weekly, promotional biographical video, co-host a bi-monthly Homebuyers Town Hall show, featured subject matter expert on Real Estate Roundtable show, The Power Is Now Program Guide e-magazine, The Power Is Now National e-magazine, article writing and blogging, social media content customization, inclusion and press releases, graphic design services, business and performance coaching, technology support, referrals, lead generation opportunities, and management support.
And we're back. For those of you just joining us, welcome to The Power Is Now. We're talking about the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And if you didn't catch it last year, go to our website, thepowerisnow.com, and you can see the 2021 series where we had industry leaders across the country really break down the 1968 Fair Housing Act, what the challenges are, what we can do to make it better. And today I'm talking to Matt Callahan. He's the president of Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership and a Loan Originator with Best Capital. And he just shared with us his passion, the success stories he's had in helping people become homeownership. And what I love about Matt is the time he takes to really help people who are not ready today. We need more originators willing to take the time to put people on the path to home ownership. Matt, again, thank you for taking the time to join me today to talk about this very important issue.
Thanks, Eric.
April is Fair Housing Month, and many organizations are doing things to promote fair housing, to discuss fair housing. And one of the reasons why it's so important, at least in my view, is because there are those who believe that fair housing the fair housing law is really not something we really need. Do we need the Fair Housing Act, Matt?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I look at it just in understanding human nature. I mean, we like to say that we get to a certain point in our evolution where people don't work, act out of conscious bias or unconscious bias or have ill intent or bad motivations. I do believe we are getting better as a society, but we'll never be perfect. And there'll always be areas of focus, areas where people can be unfairly treated and seeking housing and qualifying for a home loan. And some of it can be, what we call unconscious bias, not intentional, malevolent thought, but it's there. And so we do need the Fair Housing Act. We need enforcement mechanisms. And in our homebuyer education workshops that we offer through LA Partners in Homeownership, we have a component on fair housing, and we have kind of the things to watch out for. And if you're seeing anything's come up, what to do about, who you can contact, where you can file a complaint. So it's important that the law be in place, that it be enforced, and people be aware of it.
That's a very important component of the Fair Housing or educational series. Is your organization doing any particular events around fair housing?
We're not having any specific event, but as I said, we have a regular schedule of workshops, and our next one is May 26th, and people can sign up for it. It's one of the great things about our events that they're free, and they're in live webinar format. And you can sign up at ownla.org, ownla.org. And it's a live webinar. And so while we do have a specific component dealing with fair housing law and what to watch out for and what are the enforcement mechanisms, the whole workshop itself, I believe, is about fair housing in the sense that we're trying to create access to home ownership, break down the barriers, give people motivation. And so, we have 8 more events scheduled this year. We normally have anywhere from 50 to 100 people participate. I would say the particular focus of our events is around Southern California, most specifically Los Angeles County programs and resources. But we have people across the state joining our workshops and benefiting from them.
Well, that's because of the great education you're providing that really applies, to just about all down payment assistance programs, the things you need to have in place. Now, can you restate again for those who may be listening, the website to go to register for your homeownership seminars and your telephone number?
And so it's ownla.org. So it's www.ownla, like Los Angeles.org. And so we have a pretty good informational website, but the most important thing you can do is register for our next upcoming workshop. And it is in live webinar format. Our phone number is 213 area code 277-5599. 213-277-5599.
Matt, what does fair housing mean to you personally? And have you ever been a victim of discrimination or been a witness to someone being a victim of discrimination in housing?
Well, that's a great question. I thought about that, Eric. I'm a white male, so I'm probably the class of people that are least likely to face housing discrimination. But my wife is not white, and we've been married 40 years. And I remember it's maybe our second or third year of marriage, and we were thinking about trying to buy our first home. And we heard about a home we were interested in, so I contacted the listing agent. And my wife stayed in the car with our son, our newborn son. And so he didn't know what she looked like. And I went in there, and the real estate agent himself was not white. And I said, we're really interested in seeing your listing in this neighborhood. And he pulled me aside and he said, I have to tell you, Mr. Callahan, there's no white people in this neighborhood. And I said, wow, that's great. My wife is going to feel really comfortable there. So it wasn't, we weren't disadvantaged in any way, but it really hit me that this guy thought he was doing me a favor or somehow protecting me from going into a particular neighborhood. He wanted me to go look somewhere else. So it wasn't a typical fair housing violation that you might think of, but it was a really, it brought home the experience in a personal way of someone interjecting race unnecessarily, unfairly into the housing decision. I did experience it in a way.
Well, what a great story. And this is an example of either unconscious bias or conscious bias. He may have been just trying to do you a favor, because of his bias to people should stay, and live in areas with others just like them. I mean, that's what segregation is all about. That's what redlining is all about. And he is continuing that whole ideology. Or he could be just straight up racist and saying, hey, man, you don't want to live with these people.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe he thought he could show me a home where that would, it'd be more expensive. You need to get a higher commission or something. I don't know. But it did bring it home to me on a personal level.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing up that example, because that's my next question. Real estate agents, have been exposed for their bias, their unconscious bias and their conscious bias towards consumers. The Newsday expose in New Jersey really brought to light the extent at which agents will go to steer people to certain neighborhoods, or just to flat out not do business with people if they haven't, if they don't, look like they have money, or they have been pre-approved, and or some of these other, criteria they may impose upon buyers. Do you think that discrimination by real estate agents is still a problem today, or do we have some improvement?
Oh, there's definitely been, I think, significant improvement. One obvious thing is that we have a much more diverse, the community of real estate agents and brokers is much more diverse than it was, in the past. And so I think that's helped tremendously. We have professional organizations for realtors, NAREP, obviously the oldest professional organization in the country, but NAREP is another one. So we have a network of professional organizations helping real estate professionals understand what it means about being inclusive in their business. And it's challenging. If you're a real estate agent, you do need to focus on the client who can close now. There's that crude expression, but I think it's valid. As real estate and mortgage professionals, we only eat what we kill. We only can survive on what we close. And so we do need to prioritize those clients who can close now. But, as we spoke earlier in the show, the fortunes are in the follow-up. So taking the time and having the systems in place where we can encourage people, keep them in the process. If they're not, when people say, am I ready to buy a home? Can I buy a home? The answer is always yes. It can be followed by when. And if it's not right now, when can you buy a home? And so keeping that focus in our business will be really important. So getting back to your question, I think it has been, it's dramatically better than it was, in my opinion. But we always need to be mindful. We always need to be watchful. We need to have training. We need to call people accountable when they fail. And we need to make sure that consumers, home buyers, are aware of the laws themselves and know about the enforcement mechanisms and who they can contact.
Well, I would agree with you that there is more diversity today than there was in the 60s or in the 70s. In the 70s, in fact, there were still boards that wouldn't allow African Americans to join, even though, NAR had changed its position and allowing, African Americans in and others in. So there has been an improvement in terms of diversity, but I see the formation of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers in 1947, the Asian Real Estate Association of America, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. I see that as a defense to the lack of diversity and the lack of cooperation and the discrimination that has existed and still exists today, creating associations of real estate professionals who look like them, who understand their culture, who understand their communities, to serve them, because those who do not look like them are not serving those communities. And so can we see the existence of these organizations as an improvement, or more so as a defense to the discrimination that continues?
Wow, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I have a smart answer to it off the top of my head. It probably is both. I mean, I don't think that's a cop-out to say both. It is an improvement. It's great that we have these organizations that recognize the diversity and support it and help it and nurture it. And at the same time, you may be right. It may be a bastion of this is where it's safe to do my business. I would say that any real estate professional, mortgage loan originator who consistently operated out of conscious or unconscious bias in the way they did their business, I would just think in this market, they would be out of business pretty quickly. I mean, in Southern California, where I operate, we're so diverse. And if you really were consciously biased and saying, I'm only going to work with people who look like me, how could you stay in business? I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a way to do it, but I can't imagine it.
Well, the reality is that they are staying in business. When you look at the rate of homeownership, particularly here in California, it's 35% for African Americans, maybe in the 40s, the low 40s for Latinos, 68 to almost 70% for Caucasians. And so there is these silos or funnels, if you will, that are very much, groups staying within their own communities. And then when you look at California, it's extremely segregated. Although we are a melting pot of diversity, but you have communities, pockets of communities that is kind of a version of redlining, if you will, in that agents are selling predominantly to particular groups or ethnic groups in particular areas. And so you drive through California, you can see the Asian group, the Black group, the Latino areas, and the lack of diversification in terms of where we live versus the diversification as a whole in the state are really two different things. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I see your point on that. And, what came to mind as the market forces that are responding to that segregation is gentrification. So if you look at, for example, gentrification is one of the toughest community revitalization, community development problems to solve, because in many respects, if you look at a neighborhood that suffered historical, blight and disinvestment, and finally you're starting to get private investment in that community, well, that's a good thing, right? But if that private investment drives out historical, families that have lived there generations because they can't afford to continue to live in that neighborhood, that's the dark side, the bad side of gentrification forces. So I think going back to your issue about, we're still really balkanized, we're still really segregated in California. What's changing that is the forces of gentrification. So if you look in, for example, in Boyle Heights, in East Los Angeles, a neighborhood is historically Latino, Hispanic. But what is the housing stock? It's detached single family homes, craftsman styles, big yards. And so it's attractive to people who, are looking for that kind of housing and are willing to be maybe urban pioneers. And they're coming in and purchasing homes, driving up home prices and making it more difficult for families living there for generations to be able to continue to live there or to own a home. Same is happening in South Central Los Angeles. The whole Figueroa corridor is being beautifully revitalized, and it's a great thing. But it's also changing the way people look at South LA and making it more attractive for people from other communities to come in. So in a way, that will respond to that balkanization, that segregation you spoke about, but it's going to raise big questions about what about fairness, what about equity for people who have been living there for such a long time, and what are the opportunities for them? And the answer that I see is, don't put up artificial barriers to new investment in these communities, but instead help create opportunities for existing residents to own their own home, increase subsidies, increase strategies and access to home ownership in neighborhoods like South Los Angeles, East San Fernando Valley, Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles. My fear is that's what we're not doing. We're not doing that. We're just allowing the forces of gentrification to come in without at the same time creating opportunities for existing residents to own their own home.
You're absolutely right. And this is really a sad commentary on gentrification because, it's a negative word. But what is really gentrification? It is really the city's improving. It's investment, it's opportunity, it's business, it's an improvement in the quality of life of cities and neighborhoods. But does it have to be to the expense of those who have lived there and have raised their children there and want to stay there? Because now, because of it, they can't even afford to buy there now. And instead of the cities incentivizing the communities there, those who don't own would like to own there, they're incentivizing builders. They're providing them tax credits and all kinds of incentives, not to build homes that are affordable, but to build rental properties, rental homes or apartment buildings. I live in Riverside, and I've been in Riverside for the last 20 years, and you would not believe what is happening in downtown Riverside. The amount of building that's happening in downtown Riverside, all rental properties, no new construction happening at all in downtown Riverside that would be owner occupied for someone. It's all rental property. And this is happening across the country in all cities, and that the cities have forgotten about their citizens who want to buy there, and they're more playing to the big developers who want to invest there.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you raised that point, Eric, because getting back to our principal topic of fair housing, we definitely have to keep our eyes on the traditional sorts of fair housing violations that exist. But for me, the biggest fair housing challenge we face is answering the question is, what is workforce housing? What is affordable housing going to look like in California and across the country? And unfortunately, our policymakers are saying the answer to that question is high density, highly subsidized rental housing. That's where low and moderate income for individuals and families, sort of the workforce housing, that's where you get to live. And don't aspire to home ownership. We're not going to incentivize that. We're going to, eat up the opportunities wherever land exists. Instead of creating ownership opportunities, we're going to build more high density rental housing. And, ostensibly the motivation is we just need more housing and we need to make sure it's affordable and highly subsidized. On one hand, I could partially agree with that, but when I look at the substantial, massive profit incentives that exist for a group of elite developers, property management companies, investment banking companies that are making huge profits on these types of high density, highly subsidized rental housing projects and really stratifying. It's a new kind of redlining. It's a new kind of segregation. We're saying that workforce housing is high density rental housing rental housing projects controlled and owned by a group of elites who, by the way, all own their own home. And for sure would never have their kids living in those projects. So this is the biggest issue I think we face. A real concrete example of this, Eric, is for decades in California and across the country, we've had a really powerful tool for helping low-income families purchase a home. And it was called the Mortgage Credit Certificate Program, the MCC program, an amazingly powerful, simple, easy to use, light touch program that boosts buying power for low-income home buyers. That program was canceled by the governor and the state treasurer and the state controller last year in favor of taking that subsidy and giving it over to the rental housing developers. And that was a huge loss. I mean, every day in my mortgage business, I'm working with clients. I say, man, if we just had that MCC credit that we could layer into the transaction, these buyers would be approved, or that we can get their deal done for them. And it's gone. And it was taken without any discussion. There was no public hearing about it. It was just eliminated. And, you know, I show up there at the state treasurer's meetings every month and complain about it, and just blown in the wind. No one's listening.
Matt, this is such an important issue, and I want to take a moment here and really dive a little bit deeper there. First, you bring up the MCC credit, and take a moment and explain to everybody what that is so they can understand the significance of what you're talking about.
So the Mortgage Credit Certificate Program is about 25 years old. It's a federal, it's built into our tax code essentially, and it's every state in the country every year gets an allocation of tax-exempt financing authority from the U.S. Treasury. And then this allocation can be used for a variety of different things. It can be used to effectively subsidize affordable housing development. It can be used for public facilities of different kinds to finance those. It could also be used for home ownership. And historically, most states have carved out a portion of it to be used for the Mortgage Credit Certificate Program. So the MCC program is a federal income tax credit, typically worth about 20% of the mortgage interest a person paid in the previous year. And so roughly speaking, in California homeowner, the benefit's worth about $2,000 a year of a larger federal income tax refund. So it's real spendable money in people's pocket, which is a great thing. But the real powerful aspect of it is, as a loan originator, as a lender, we can anticipate that future tax credit that the person's getting and then treat it as qualifying income on their loan application. So bottom line is it adds maybe $200 to $300 a month of income on their loan application that we can use for underwriting purposes. And $200 to $300 may not sound like a lot, but it's a deal breaker many, many times, and it saves deals. It was a huge blow to our efforts to help low-income families purchase a home when that program was canceled by the governor and state treasurer and state controller last year.
Matt, thanks for breaking that down for everyone. It is a game changer. I know for me, I've been an originator for 40 years. Using that program has saved so many deals because, as you know, we have limitations on debt to income ratio, right? And there are many people who are just points away, 2, 3, 4 points away from being eligible to get financing. And then most down payment assistance programs have debt to income ratios of 45. There are some that will go to 50 and even rarer, 55, but most of them are 45. And so here in this high cost state, that extra $2,000 a year is a big deal. Yeah. Now, I want our listeners to understand what you just laid out for us, because this program went away without a public hearing.
Right.
This program went away without any media attention whatsoever. Where was the media? How do we let essentially, millions of dollars that could help, low to moderate income families, first-time home buyers, people get into the game, go away, but instead incentivize builders just to build more workforce housing, so to speak. And I love your characterization of what workforce housing is. It's another form of redlining. It's another form of steering, if you will, those who cannot afford to buy into communities or areas where they can live and work, separate from those who can afford to buy in areas in which they are actually traveling to work.
Yeah, and if you really look at why that is so important, because ownership housing is not just housing. It's a long-term stable housing option. It's a wealth building powerhouse. It's a way we create generational wealth. It's what low income and moderate income people aspire to. I've never spoken to a low and moderate income individual who has a housing concern and says, I want to stay in subsidized rental housing my whole life. They want to own their home, and we need to make that possible. And it's the simplest, it's efficient, it works, it's egalitarian, it's democratic, and it's what we should be focused on. But because of the massive financial incentives and keeping people in these high density, highly subsidized rental housing projects, and what's interesting about these projects is that all of the profit from these projects, all the revenue has been privatized, all of the risk has been socialized. We've pushed all of the risk on these projects onto the public sector and allowed these private developers, investment bankers, property management companies just to reap the benefits for it. And we've dramatically changing the characteristics of housing in California. I'll tell you, this is maybe a little bit of a sidetrack, Eric, and I apologize, but I'm even suspicious about this huge push for ADUs. And the reason why is because we're taking single family homes, which are the path to all the great things we just talked about home ownership offers, and saying, well, we're going to add an extra unit on that property. And so what do? You almost double the potential rental income from that property, and you change the way the investment community is going to look at that property and say, well, maybe that property is now more profitable for long-term holding as a rental property, and we're taking it out of the inventory of homes that are available for individuals and families to purchase and to own or occupy. So I know I'm blowing in the wind in that one, but I'm becoming increasingly suspicious about the big push for ADUs. I don't think it's going to be great for home ownership over the long term.
I think you have every right to be suspicious. And, what is taking place, and I love how you have described all of this. I mean, all the risk being socialized, all the profit being privatized, all this emphasis on building up local cities infrastructure, to meet the kind of the desire of millennials and Gen Ys. They all want to be downtown. They want everything to be local. And so I get it. I love it. Actually, the development is happening, but to the expense of those who can buy, and diverting monies and funds that could support them in buying, they're giving it to the developers. And it doesn't make sense. This is why I think, number one, this is happening because politicians are allowing it to happen. And so no one trusts any politician. It seems like they're just in the hand, their hands are in the pockets of the developers. There's some type of quid pro quo to allow this to take place, especially when you see no public hearings taking place by it. And you have to wonder, who's getting paid, follow the money. And then, of course, the media. Where is the media? You hear nothing on any network, cable television, or anything about this. And as you know, there's a growing distrust of the media. And so all of this kind of, it makes us all cynical and really suspicious of every program that exists out there if it's not straight up all about supporting, assisting home ownership.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many forces at play at why this change is happening. One of the big justifications for this high density, highly subsidized rental housing projects is that we needed to deal with the homeless crisis. Well, I started working at the LA City Housing Department in 1985. In 1985, everybody was talking about the homeless crisis, and we're still talking about it today. So with the thousands and thousands of units that have been added, the street encampments, the homeless problem has not diminished at all. It's only gotten worse. And so adding inventory is not solving the problem. There's a whole host of factors going into what causes people to be forced into living on the street. And this is not the right time to go into that discussion. But too often I see the homeless crisis being the justification for, just this headlong push into building more subsidized rental housing projects at the expense of expanding home ownership opportunities, which will really be the solution to so many of the problems we're facing in terms of economic justice and fairness, generational wealth. And so it's a complex thing. And all we can do is, go back to the very first question you asked and said, what can we do about all this? What does power of now mean to me? And it means just me, after this call, taking the next appointment I can with a client and see if I can get them pre-approved and into contract and buying a house.
You're absolutely right. You're only this one person, right? I mean, and I think it really does start with us individually. I am an originator as well, but I have the good fortune of having a platform, a media platform that has a singular focus on housing and homeownership and finance. And I want to do my part to expose what's going on, to bring these issues to light. And, I think that we all know that the only way we're going to solve escalating prices, the only way we're going to deal with these challenges is that we have to build more homes, and it's not happening. We're not building more homes. What we're building, though, are more rental housing units downtown and everywhere. And cities are incentivizing builders to do this, nonprofit builders, for-profit builders. And you have to ask yourself why, when we know that is the only solution to this problem. God is not making any more land, right? And so some areas it's so dense. It's a shame that what remaining land that exists is not homes being built to own, but to rent. And how are we allowing our politicians, our mayors, our city council, how are we allowing this to happen? I think we're not allowing it to happen. We just don't know about it.
Yeah. There is one positive thing. There's a number of positive things that it's important to stay hopeful. State Senator Robert Hertzberg has an assembly bill, a Senate bill. I forget the bill number, but I've spoken in favor of it a couple of times. I'll get it for you, Eric, and reference it. It's going through the legislature now, and it's a $25 billion state bond that would be focused on building new ownership housing and in a very creative strategy to incorporate, a down payment subsidy into the financing itself. So not only would it be more housing, it would be a more affordable home ownership housing. And so that bill's going through the legislature now. Frustratingly, at the last hearing we had, the affordable rental housing developers showed up and are speaking against it, and they want a portion of that money to go to them. And so it's kind of 50-50 right now where that bill's going to end up. But Senator Hertzberg is an example of somebody who's really trying to push the benefits of home ownership. And I'll get the information to that legislation to you so you can let your listeners know about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And we're going to reach out to his office, see if he'll come on to talk about that very important bill. Matt, it has been a great conversation with you today. I could go on and on, man, and I definitely want you to come back. You are a great resource, and I love the fact that you have years of lending experience, so you know what's happening on the mortgage side as well as on the real estate side. And I want to ask you just a couple more final questions here before I let you get back to work. Real estate agents, as I mentioned, have been, part of the problem, and they can be a part of the solution. I believe that diversity that we talked about, it's more diverse today. It's siloed, but it is more diverse today. But in banking, discrimination in banking, discouraging people, the lack of diversity is part of the problem there as well. Don't you agree? And what can be done?
So in the financial sector and creating diversity among training more loan officers, for example, who, a more diverse pool of mortgage loan originators, training more people to get into the mortgage industry at all levels, not just at originators, but processors, underwriters, people working in the secondary mortgage market. I know Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are really doing a lot in that area. And I applaud that. I hate to keep coming back to, focusing on areas of concern. We have to be careful that it's not that's not just, for show, that it's not just dressing, that we're hiring people and putting them in fancy positions and titles, but they're to be the diversity, manager for a different lender. But are those people sitting on the credit committee? Are they really, coming up with underwriting policies and guidelines? And I worry that they're not. They may be passing out grants and showing up at dinners and meetings and making fancy speeches, but are they really changing things? And quite frankly, everybody's talking about equity right now, and that's great. But if everything is equally unaccessible, if homeownership is equally unaccessible to everybody, that's not helping. We need to return our focus on affordability, overcoming credit barriers, overcoming savings barriers, and really translate all of that energy and focus on that we have right now in equitable housing, and really translate it into access to home ownership.
Well, you make some very powerful points. And, I too am a witness to the fact that we see, African Americans, Latinos in leadership positions, but they're mostly sales, or it's supporting nonprofits, attending meetings and making speeches. And you're absolutely right. There is no diversity at the C-suite level where decisions are actually being made. Credit policy is being made. And that's what we need to see more of. In addition to the fact there is very little diversity on the front line of mortgage originators and underwriters. And I think until we see that, we're going to still see, I think, discrimination, unconscious bias still be a major part in the rate of homeownership and the outreach to communities of color by loan originators and banks in general. Matt, final question. The 1968 Fair Housing Act, 54 years have passed by. The homeownership rate is as low as it was today as was then. And, many people are still violating the law. It was just not even a few years ago, AGs across the country were suing banks for redlining. And then we're hearing something every day. And of course, the whole movement to social justice, economic justice, because there is no justice. What say you in terms of enforcing fair housing in a way that will make it a real deterrent? Do you see any way to making it more enforceable or a real deterrent for those who would violate it?
The laws are in place. People know how to access, and we can improve access to information about how to file complaints. We can do training. We can, I'm not confident there's an easy, simple solution, Eric. It's what we have been doing. It's more education, it's more training, it's more access. It's creating more requirements, for example, at the GSEs, the Fannie and Freddie, to increase their affordable housing goals. Let's be very conscious not about just the window dressing, but what we really do on breaking down affordability barriers, credit barriers, savings barriers, and access barriers. So it's a team effort. We've all got to work on it. I wish I could say there's one magic thing, one switch that we could flip and it would fix everything. It's not. So it's a combination of the very retail things that we spoke about at the beginning, just individual loan officers, real estate professionals getting out there and just trying to close deals. And then also keeping our focus on, through programs like yours, like, for example, highlighting Senator Hertzberg's initiative, or calling people to task on the cancellation of the mortgage credit certificate program. I mean, you're doing an amazing job at that sort of macro level and getting the word out and promoting it with series like this. I think it's critically important.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you for your time today. This has been a great interview, and I hope everyone watching or listening to the podcast will share the information. Any final thoughts or comments you want to share? And then also provide your telephone number and email address. Folks, if you're looking for a loan, I mean, this is a guy you ought to talk to in LA.
Thanks, Eric, for the opportunity today. It's been a privilege. I would say one practical thought that I have right now would leave for folks is don't get disengaged in the buying process. Don't be put off by rising interest rates or low inventory. Stay engaged. It is possible, like the clients that I work with who are active shoppers that are seeing lots of homes, they're being as flexible as possible. They are getting into contract. It's a heavier lift, but it is totally possible. So don't give up, stay involved. My phone number is area code 562-391-6453. 562-391-6453. My email address is Matt, M-A-T-T, at homecenterla.com. homecenterla.com. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Matt. Matt Callahan is an extraordinary real estate professional, mortgage professional, and you've just been a witness to it. He knows what's going on, what the challenges are. And if you're looking for a loan officer in Los Angeles, please reach out to Matt. I appreciate the work he's doing with education as well, with the Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership Organization, of which he's the president. And again, we really appreciate his time today. Well, this is another great conversation about the 1968 Fair Housing Act. Please share our information, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, download our TV app, Power is Now TV, and share this information, folks. People just don't know what's going on. I think that's it. People don't know what's going on. And the media, mainstream media is not covering it. And so one day we will be mainstream media. We want to be the HGTV of real estate information, real information, like HGTV is of real estate entertainment. We want to bring what's really going on to the hearts and minds of real estate professionals and consumers every day. And we're doing this right now through the 1968 Fair Housing Series. We have the Homeownership Series that'll be starting in June. Look out for the June Homeownership Series as well. And please go to our website at thepowerisnow.com and check out last year's Fair Housing Series and Homeownership Series. Well, again, thank you for your time today. Remember, we are at our best and we maximize our success when we act now. The power is now.